6 months into Israel's genocidal war on Gaza, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is coming under mounting pressure both at home and among key international allies. Just how long can he cling on to power? Well, at home, Benjamin Netanyahu faces legal challenges, including for alleged corruption, which he denies, and the wrath of the families of Israeli hostages still being held in Gaza. Meanwhile, the US appears to be losing patience with his crushing war on the territory, but he's been in and out of power since 1996, and he is a political survivor. So can he overcome the challenges he now faces, or is his luck running out? We'll try to answer that in a moment, but first, here's TRT World's Joel Flynn in occupied East Jerusalem with more on what Netanyahu has to deal with.
Throughout Israel's history, there have been charismatic and calculating leaders that have shaped and reshaped the landscape of this still nascent nation. But Benjamin Netanyahu has, over the last 6 months, perhaps defined the destinies of millions in a way that few others before him have. He now faces the challenge of a lifetime. Opposition to him domestically is ramping up at a level hitherto unforeseen. The protests that have been witnessed weekly in places like Tel Aviv have seen huge numbers of people, more than tens of thousands, coming out onto the streets and decrying his leadership, asking him to take responsibility, not just for the October 7th attacks and the failures around security and military preparedness for that, but specifically for the failure to secure the release of the 130 or so hostages still believed to be held by Hamas. You can hear that on the streets of Tel Aviv, you can hear that throughout the country, and in particular you can hear that too from the families of the hostages who now believe that Benjamin Netanyahu is not just failing to secure their release, but is also an active impediment. Indeed, there was a documentary released here in Israel just a couple of weeks ago, which suggested that Netanyahu was, in the words of anonymous sources, parties to ceasefire talks, an obstruction to the release of those hostages. Exactly what Netanyahu's game is going to be is something that many have speculated on. Domestically, opposition too has come from the political sphere. Ministers in his National Unity Coalition, a coalition which increasingly looks very fragile indeed, has seen people like Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, Benny Gantz, also a member of the war cabinet, increasingly vocal in their criticism of Netanyahu. At a time when diplomatic pressure is also ramping up and relations with the United States in particular are increasingly strained, how Netanyahu is able to withstand that pressure and deal with the situation is fundamentally the question that is at the heart of everything that exists in this region. Where it all leaves Israel, where it leaves Gaza, or indeed where it leaves the whole of the Middle East, is a place that is more unsafe, is a place that's more uncertain now, and a place that is more bound up in the political calculations of one person than at any other time in the history. Exactly where this goes next is something that is going to be determined by Netanyahu, and his future is something that is going to shape not just the lives of the millions that are existing in this region and dealing with the escalating war, but possibly, as we have been told by many, the lives of people for generations to come. Joel Flynn, TRT World for Roundtable in occupied East Jerusalem.
So here's an example of just how tense that relationship between Netanyahu and the US is. Washington is reportedly considering sanctions against an Israeli military unit accused of human rights abuses. This was Netanyahu's response.
We will land additional and painful blows on Hamas, and it will happen soon. In the coming days, we will increase the military and political pressure on Hamas, because this is the only way to free our hostages and achieve our victory.
Well, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Tel Aviv is Akiva Eldar. He's a political analyst and contributor for the Haaretz newspaper. He's also the author of Lords of the Land, the war for Israel's settlements in the occupied territories. In Beirut, we have Samir Nader. He's a columnist for Al Monitor's Lebanon Pulse. He's also director at the Levant Institute for Strategic Affairs. And here with me in the studios, Chris Doyle, director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding, and Yousef Alhelou. He is a Palestinian journalist and political analyst. Gentlemen, you're all very welcome to Roundtable. Akiva, I'll come to you first of all with the question, how much damage has Benjamin Netanyahu done to Israel for months and months?
Well, I think that historians 20, 30, 50 years from now will still deal with this question. I think that we haven't reached the top of the abyss. Netanyahu has done damage to the reputation of Israel that it doesn't only have, according to foreign sources, the nuclear power, nuclear weapons. I think the secret weapon is that the Jews are smart, maybe smarter than their neighbors. And I think that as one of the leaders of Hezbollah said, if we had thought that Netanyahu and the Israelis are that stupid, we wouldn't have gotten involved in this war. And the other thing is the image that the United States is in the pockets of Israel. And Netanyahu has eroded the strategic asset, the image of, I call it constructive anti-Semitism, that Israel, the Jews, control the world. And he has exposed the weakness of Israel, that you cannot trust the rational considerations of the Israeli government. He has allowed the United States to send a message to the entire international community that Israel, headed by Netanyahu, is a loose cannon, that you can't trust the Israelis, that the Abraham Accords, as well as the peace agreements with Jordan and Egypt, shouldn't be taken for granted. And this is a very long-term damage to Israel's strategic interest.
Let's bring in Sami. Sami, would you agree with that assessment? We've just heard Netanyahu described as a loose cannon. Some would say a very dangerous loose cannon.
I think that the very fact that the Israeli Prime Minister is blocking any possibility of a political solution to this conflict is leading its country and the whole region to an abyss. And you cannot build neither peace nor prosperity nor stability with only military means. And the simple fact that Israel is blocking any political or the possibility or any political settlement, this is throwing the whole region in an indefinite cycle of violence. And any observer would say that this as well has been very damaging to the United States of America, the main partner of Israel. Never U.S. has been as much as now isolated on the international scene. And never the relationship between the two countries reached this low level. And this is contributing to the isolation of U.S. and we have seen it at the United Nations consecutive votes where we've seen the deep divide on the international level. The West and the rest, and guess what? The rest is now a majority on the international scene. And this is something as well unprecedented in the recent history of the Middle East.
Thanks, Sami. Yousef, is it fair to say that Netanyahu's future is completely tied to this war in Gaza and that when the war ends, he's out?
Yes, that's why he is prolonging this genocide in Gaza, because he knows as soon as this conflict comes to an end, he will face corruption scandals. He's already been blamed for the total fiasco and failure to what happened on the 7th of October. He is the most far-right extreme anti-peace prime minister in Israel's history, being supported by Ben Gvir and Smotrich, the most extreme candidates who are supporting him. So he wouldn't survive without the support of those fanatics and the settlers in Israel.
Chris, everything now for Netanyahu hinges on whatever success looks like in his war against Hamas and the people of Gaza. I mean, this has been going on now for 6 months plus. Does he just keep going?
For Netanyahu, he needs a crisis, and he'll try to exacerbate and inflame these crises, whether it's with Gaza or with Hezbollah in Lebanon or in the West Bank, and indeed Syria and Iran. As long as he can keep that sense that Israel is under threat, you can't change, therefore, the captain in the middle of a storm, he will believe that he will stay in power. And I think, though, that he does see a way out of this. I think he believes that he can deliver, in his own view, a strategic victory against Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran, to actually go back in front of the Israeli electorate and voters and try to proclaim this, then he might have a chance. Now, I don't personally buy that. I think that this is his own arrogance, his own hubris. But it's also worth recognizing that he is the most accomplished politician in Israel of his generation. He's a survivor, he's an operator. In many ways, he has flourished because his opponents do not have the dark arts of politics that he possesses. But I think in the end, the Israeli public will remember that he took their security for granted prior to 7th of October. He was in charge when that calamity, the massacre of 1,200 Israelis took place. He hasn't apologized. He blames everybody else, from the media to the soldiers, but himself. And ever since then, he has failed to draw up any sort of sense of a strategy to handle the situation as it is. He has rained down horror upon Gaza. But actually, far from defeating Hamas, in many ways, it has empowered Hamas in terms of popularity, in terms of funding and stature within the region. And he has, at the same time, antagonized key alliances that Akiva Eldar was talking about.
Akiva, what does the Israeli public feel about the intelligence failures that led up to that terrible day, October the 7th, for Israel? Do people blame Netanyahu or the intelligence system? Ultimately, he was in charge.
Well, you know that just yesterday, the chief of the IDF intelligence has decided or declared that he will resign. And he took responsibility. And there is an important line in his final statement. He said, the authority comes with responsibility. And as Chris just said, Netanyahu takes credit for successes, like the attack in Iran that was accepted by the international community because it was perceived as a minor response to the Iranian attack. So he takes responsibility for successes, and the Israeli public is fed up with it. If there was somebody else to challenge him, like Benny Gantz, before he joined the cabinet, I think in the future elections that may happen, I believe, this year, Netanyahu would lose. I want to remind the viewers that Netanyahu lost twice. Once in 1999, he lost to Ehud Barak, and in 21, he lost to Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid. So it's not that he is unbeatable. And the reason that he will do everything, as was mentioned before, to keep the war in Gaza as well as in the West Bank on top of the agenda, and he is not doing what he should have done in order to release the hostages, that he never took responsibility for what the whereabouts on October 7th. So the Israeli public is a little bit, I would say, in a fatigue. After 1 year of demonstrations against the judiciary coup d'etat, that it is actually still in the agenda, in his agenda. It hasn't gone anywhere. And people feel, they served 6 months. I just met a relative who served 6 months in Gaza, and he will be drafted again in few weeks. So people are worried about the captives. They are worried about what's happening in Gaza. And they are worried about the future, because Netanyahu never gave any idea what his exit strategy. He refused to Biden's plan. He refused to the partners from the center-right, Gantz and Eisenkot, to accept the idea that the Palestinian Authority will take over. And people understand, more and more people understand, that Netanyahu has turned from a solution to the ultimate problem of the future of the Israeli public.
Sami, I read a very interesting piece in the English newspaper The Guardian this week. This is from Naama Lazimi. She is a Labour Party member of the Israeli Knesset, so she's an opposition politician. Just have a listen to what she wrote. She says, Netanyahu's partners in the extreme right-wing government want a perpetual war and to see Israel conquer the Gaza Strip and settle there. Those advocating for perpetual conflict seem to prioritise power over life. Is this all about clinging to power for Benjamin Netanyahu?
Maybe his personal political life depends on the outcome of this battle. However, what we are witnessing is a kind of kicking down the can, or kicking the can down the road, trying to buy time. Because let's recall that any of the three objectives stated by Netanyahu for the military operation in Gaza have been achieved. The hostages haven't been released. The capability of Hamas, although that has been diminished, but that are not totally destroyed. And there is no guarantee that what happened on October 7 will not happen in the future. So any of the objectives that are stated have been achieved despite the military power of Israel army. And despite of that, the military operation continued. So this may suggest that Netanyahu is trying to buy time. He's betting on a change in the balance of power, maybe on the ground. Maybe he's betting on a military outcome that did not happen yet, or maybe he's betting, and most likely I think, he's betting on a change in the leadership in the United States of America. Because things are going turned sour with Biden, the Biden administration, and maybe he's trying to wait for Trump as a potential partner who would agree with him on a plan. But what will this plan be? Let's recall that the plan that has been proposed by the Trump administration did not take off. And so we end up in a situation with no political settlement, with no end in mind. And now the big question is, what is the strategic objective Netanyahu is trying to achieve? Is there any hidden objective, like, for instance, the transfer of the Palestinian population from Gaza? If this is the outcome, this is a promise for an endless cycle of violence in the Middle East and all over the world.
Thanks, Sami. Let's take a look at just some ratings in Israel. So this was conducted recently. The majority of Israelis give Netanyahu low ratings. 57% of people have a poor opinion of his performance. While the IDF Chief of Staff, Herzi Halevi, he topped the rankings, positive performance, 48%. And let's have a listen to an activist who wants Netanyahu gone.
We're trying to get rid of this dictator for over a decade now. And we haven't been very successful, sadly, and it's been costing us very high prices. And it's extremely emotional and sad to see what has happened to this country.
So, Yousef, the paradox is, as much as the Israeli public are turning against Netanyahu, many people there are still in favour of the war in Gaza, where you're from.
Well, he's a very arrogant politician. He is uniting the Israeli society behind him. And let's also remember that he's the longest serving prime minister in Israel's history. And he doesn't want to leave the political scene and to be remembered by the attack that happened on the 7th of October for failing to protect the Israeli society. And he is not making Israelis and Jews safer in the world. On the contrary, many Jews are rising up. They say not in our names. And they say that the images that we see coming from Gaza, it reminds the world of the Nazi Germany. So he is the one who's going to remembered by the prime minister who was in favor of killing children in Gaza, attacking hospitals, and for failing to fulfill his promises to release the hostages. Actually, he will be remembered as the one who gave instructions to the Israeli army to open fire on the hostages.
Chris, legacy is very important for statespeople, isn't it? How they're remembered after they're gone. I mean, in his head, Netanyahu probably thought he would go down as one of the great Israeli leaders, up there with David Ben-Gurion. It's not going to happen, is it?
If you only go back a few years ago to the end of the Trump administration, there's Netanyahu. He's managed to get Donald Trump, US president, to recognize Jerusalem, Israel's capital. He's managed to secure a peace deal with the UAE, with Bahrain, with Sudan, Morocco. It all looks rosy except for his own personal position because he was up against charges of serious corruption. And now he's going to be remembered for these epic historic failures of security. I mean, he used to be called Mr. Security, but now can you really do that? He has put Israel in extraordinary jeopardy. 300 projectiles launched from Iran only, a couple of weeks ago. And so I do think his legacy is really under question. And it will, I'm sure, annoy him. But he still has options. He's still pushing in certain areas, like the settlements in the West Bank. We saw in March the largest land grab since the Oslo Accords of 1993. So in the views of those who support that settlement project in the West Bank, by pushing there, he could still be remembered as a champion of that cause. He will hope, as I said before, that perhaps he will be seen as the man who defeated Hamas and removed Hamas as a strategic threat. But we are a long way from that. And I think ultimately his career, like so many politicians' careers, will end in failure.
Akiva, give us your prediction. How does this all end for Netanyahu?
If I could predict how the American elections will end, I could do it easily. I can say that if President Biden will be re-elected, he will be free to do what he just started to do, but in another kind of volume. Instead of just putting sanctions on several zealots from the settlers community, he could do what the United States did to end the apartheid regime in South Africa. And if this happens, if the Israelis, for instance, will not be allowed to travel to the United States without a visa or completely banned from entering the borders of the United States, this will have a very similar impact to what the sanctions of South Africa did to the apartheid regime there. And if those meet together, the pressure from outside, because the United States can give a green light to the entire international community to follow suit. And then if the Israeli people will feel that Israel is turning to a pariah state, and they started already feeling this, as in the article I published in Haaretz, with a list of sanctions. For instance, the Israeli artists could not participate in the Biennale this year. Israelis who opened restaurants in New York are hiding the Hebrew letters there. And I can go on with this. So I can predict that if Biden and the Democrats will win the elections, they will save Israel from itself. And this will be the end of Netanyahu's legacy. And maybe he will even listen to his wife, who said once, the Israelis don't understand that you are a gift from God, and let's leave them and move somewhere else.
Akiva, it's always important to listen to your wife. Akiva, Sami, Yousef and Chris, thank you all so much for your insight. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. And if you like what you see there, please do hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.